So I figured I'd talk a little bit about Hengeyokai and how they kind of fit into the greater scheme of things in the setting of Werewolf the Apocalypse. I feel there's a bit of a blind spot in how the game kind of presents things in a way because so much of it's focused around the 13 tribes of the Western Concordiate. Because they cover so much of the planet's territories, you get the implication that they're just the Concordiate. But, you know, it's there in the name. They're the Western Concordiate, which implies that there is, somewhere out there, in another direction, another alternative Concordiate. And that is the Eastern Concordiate, or as they refer to themselves, the Beast Courts. The greater collection of the various different kinds of shapeshifters that are the Hengeyokai. There's, partly driven by the fact that the first release that came out for the Year of the Lotus books, being Kindred of the East, and how the Kuei Jin differ dramatically in origin and form from Western Cainite kindred. It kind of carried forward this idea and impression that, like, everything that came out of the East Asian books would be radically alternative takes on, the standard, format of supernatural creatures we were used to with the other, various World of Darkness titles. And yet, like Mage really didn't have much anything. They had their Dragons of the East book, which just kind of focused a little bit more on stuff like the Akashic Brotherhood and the Euthanatos. Like, Eastern philosophy was already built into Mage in many ways. They did have alternative Kithane for Changeling, and there was a bit of difference in how really they just kind of perceived the hierarchy of the underworld and the Dark Kingdom of Jade. But Charon and the Jade Emperor could basically just be the same person. And in fact, there's a lot of figures throughout the World of Darkness that are like talked as if they were separate beings, but they're probably the same. I am personally of the theory that Set is Cain, and therefore, in a way, Osiris is actually Abel, and stuff like that. Just depending on your cultural framework, you'll, name these people different things, and so on and so forth. The thing with the Eastern Concordiate and the Hengeyokai, and perhaps in part why they've been relatively stable and not, running around the world destroying each other and taking over territories that weren't originally theirs to guard, is that the Eastern Concordiate has kept its shit together. The Western Concordiate is the one that flew off the rails and had the War of Rage and tried to wipe out all the other shapeshifters, and then one by one over the centuries since has slowly been turning on their own, one at a time. The White Howlers fall and become the Black Spiral Dancers. The Croatan, admittedly in their case they sacrificed themselves, but had they survived, they would have been, just as under attack as the Wendigo and the Uktena had been. At least their tribes were salvaged, and and eventually there is some like basis of a truce, at least amongst the werewolves of the different bloodlines. The Bunyip were wiped out. They were totally just a last gasp of the War of Rage because the other werewolves didn't really know how to deal with marsupial werewolves. And, they drive everything else into hiding. They're lucky that the Korax and the Niuisha might occasionally talk to them. Especially the Korax, I guess, because they're the least affected. Wolves and ravens have always been friends in nature, so to say. But, they fucked up. Whereas in the East, they just, stuck to what they're supposed to do. That all the different, types of shapeshifter, has their role to play, including the werewolves. But, they're not necessarily in charge any more than any of the others. In fact, more often than not, it seems to be, they're were-crocodiles and they're were-sharks that, seem to have some of the most prominent positions. Perhaps the Khan, the were-tigers, but there are wolves in that region of the world, but they're not as fixated at the top You know, they do include in the basic Hengeyokai book, you know, information on like the samurai shadow lords called the Haken that are found in Japan. I felt like there also should have been a bit more inclusion about, you know, what the Bongnars and Glasswalker counterparts are like there, and that I don't like. These are densely populated areas that have had cities for a long time, so you would think that, that being the case, they would be hotspots for the werewolves that have abandoned the wilderness and largely live in city environments. And yet, you know, they're more American in the way that the game overall presents them. I've always felt that was a little flaw. But, you know, really, the beast courts are what the shapeshifters are supposed to be like, where they're all in balance and in alliance with each other for the greater effort of, you know, protecting, you know, the sacred places and all that kind of shit, yada, yada, yada. Captain Planet. The werewolves have fucked everything up, and as I've said in other videos, I kind of feel like, really, in a way, they are ultimately responsible for the apocalypse that they are about to face, because they are the ones that through their arrogance have thrown, you know, like their own kind off balance by taking out so many of the other types of Pharaoh, and, you know, their impergium of humankind having driven humans quite willingly into the arms of both Worm and Weaver, further, you know, threatening to destabilize the balance of the triad that keeps Gaia nice and healthy and all that kind of stuff. And they continue to be arrogant and stubborn up to the very bitter end, as it were. The werewolves are just as much villains and monsters as vampires are, and changelings and all the others, demons, mummies, but more than any others, they pump themselves up and delude themselves into thinking that they are heroes. So, I guess there you go. Hengeyokai. Stay waspinated.